Welcome to Gradient Daily. Today, we are unpacking a paper titled Instant 3D Models from One Photo inside LRM. We are looking at a solution to a notorious bottleneck in computer graphics, the time it takes to generate a 3D asset from scratch. Imagine feeding a flat 2D portrait into a system, and in a fraction of a second, extracting a fully textured, smoothly rotating 3D mesh. This research, submitted to ICLR 2024 by Yikong Hong and collaborators, tackles exactly that. The mathematical hurdle is the single-image paradox. A 2D silhouette provides no depth data. Infinite 3D shapes could cast that exact shadow. Resolving this ill-posed problem traditionally requires hours of manual modeling or multi-view photogrammetry. The Large Reconstruction Model, or LRM, bypasses that hours-long pipeline. It infers the full 3D geometry from a single image in just 5 seconds. Eliminating this latency bottleneck moves 3D generation from a slow, deliberate art form to an instant utility for gaming, virtual reality, and industrial design. This diagram shows how LRM diverges from previous models. On the left, ShapeNet constrained earlier models to category-specific memorization, like just learning chairs. On the right, LRM trains on Objaverse and MVMNet, a massive dataset of synthetic and messy real-world captures. It is the difference between studying marine biology by looking at a single aquarium versus having access to a global encyclopedia and a field guide. At the scale of 1 million highly diverse objects, the model is mathematically forced to abandon memorization. There are simply too many shapes to overfit. Instead of memorizing specific templates, the network learns the generalized underlying rules of 3D geometry and light transport. Data scale acts as the prerequisite for generating objects in the wild. It can only infer unseen geometry if its training set encompasses the real-world structural diversity. To output these objects, LRM does not predict a hollow polygon mesh. It predicts the parameters of a neural radiance field, or NeRF. Think of a traditional 3D mesh as an empty shell. A NeRF operates more like a solid block of marble, where every microscopic coordinate within that volume contains continuous data. This diagram illustrates NeRF volume rendering. The process relies on ray marching, casting a virtual ray from a camera position through a 3D coordinate space. A continuous multi-layer perceptron acts as the function for this space. It takes 5D coordinates, your XYZ spatial location, plus your viewing direction, as the input. As the ray marches forward, the algorithm queries every point along the line for its specific color and volume density. It accumulates these values to calculate the final color of a single 2D pixel. This volume integration along a ray provides a strictly differentiable process, satisfying the technical requirement to train the neural network backward from a rendered image. Traditionally, optimizing a NeRF for a single scene takes hours of iterative processing. LRM predicts the entire field in one pass. Selecting NeRF as the target representation bypasses the strict topological limits of point clouds and meshes. The model generates highly complex, continuous 3D structures without worrying about polygon counts. Predicting that dense volumetric data requires an incredibly powerful processing engine, the transformer network. If the NeRF is the marble, the transformer is the master sculptor. Armed with a photographic memory of 1 million training objects, it examines a single 2D photo and instantly deduces how to carve the unseen back half. The architecture begins by breaking the 2D input down. The image passes through a vision transformer, or VIT, encoder, which flattens the pixels into a linear sequence of distinct tokens. These tokens are then fed directly into the massive 500 million parameter transformer architecture. Inside the network, a mechanism called self-attention analyzes the sequence. It correlates global features across the flat image, such as a shadow cast on a surface or the curve of an edge. By mapping how these 2D highlights and shadows interact, the self-attention mechanism mathematically infers the unseen 3D depth of the object. Storing the vast geometric prior necessary to make these deductions requires immense memory capacity, which is exactly why the architecture demands 500 million learnable parameters. At this scale, millions of isolated data points interconnect simultaneously, weaving flat 2D context into a complete volumetric map. The transformer's self-attention is uniquely capable of this mapping. It is the only mechanism robust enough to translate a flat sequence of visual tokens directly into a complex 3D radiance field. This diagram shows the end-to-end optimization pipeline used to train the entire system. A 2D image goes through the LRM forward pass to generate a NERF, which then renders a novel view. During training, the system compares that rendered novel view against ground truth images of the same object from different angles. Any difference between the prediction and the reality results in an error penalty. That error gradient flows all the way backward. It travels from the rendered image, through the NERF rendering equations, and directly into the transformer's parameters to adjust their weights. Traditional systems rely on iterative gradient descent per scene. But once this network is fully trained, inference requires only a single forward pass. That single propagation through the network is what drops the processing time down to a flat 5 seconds. End-to-end training forces those 500 million parameters to internalize the physics of 3D geometry, guided entirely by 2D pixel error signals. The real test of this architecture is its performance on out-of-distribution inputs, images it was never explicitly trained on. Here, we see the model successfully inferring geometry from AI-generated art. It produces a stable, rotating 3D volume for a surreal, biologically impossible creature. LRM handles generative AI art because its generalized prior relies on visual patterns and not on strict real-world physical constraints. It also shows robust performance on in-the-wild smartphone captures, easily resolving geometry even when the subject lacks perfect studio lighting. The primary limitation is occlusion. When the back half of an object is completely hidden, the model must hallucinate that geometry based purely on the biases of its training distribution. Extreme anatomical anomalies might confuse the prediction, but LRM proves that scaling dataset size effectively overcomes the rigid category limitations of past architectures. This paper delivers 3 core structural takeaways. First, abandoning small, category-specific training sets for the 1 million object scale of Objaverse and MVMNet. Second, mapping 2D inputs directly to a continuous neural radiance field using a 500 million parameter transformer. Third, achieving a 5-second inference speed that extracts solid, usable 3D assets from raw 2D pixels. These 3 pillars demonstrate exactly how data scale and high-capacity networks solve previously intractable rendering bottlenecks. The implications point directly to natively integrating LRM architectures into broader text-to-3D or generative video pipelines, enabling instant volumetric generation. Well, thanks for joining us for this breakdown. If you want more deep dives into the papers driving AI forward, hit the like button and subscribe to Gradient Daily. We'll see you in the next one.